So in this session, we're going to talk about one of the new features that's added in 2019, the ability to do theming of your applications. So first thing we'll do is we'll have a legal disclaimer, and let's go over the agenda. So the first thing I'll introduce myself to you. Then we're going to talk about how you use the built-in themes that Appeon provides, how you can create your own theme, a new feature in R2, the ability to do theming at a window or control level. The theming that was introduced in the original version of 2019 was application-wide. So you could specify the way the command button would look, but every command button in your application would look that way. There was no ability to have command buttons look one way in one area and look at a different way in a different area. And that's a feature that's been provided in R2. It's ability to provide customization on a window by window and control by control basis. We're going to talk about how you deploy those themes with your application, and then we'll have a demo, and then we'll have some questions and answers. So first, a little bit about myself. I've been using PowerBuilder since version 1. I determined shortly after I started using it that this is something I could make a living doing as an independent contractor, and so I did that for 15 years. And then decided after that I was ready to go back to working full-time for a company, and I went to a company called Integrated Data Services, and I've been there ever since, so that's been about 14 years now. In addition to PowerBuilder, the languages I'm familiar with are Oracle PL SQL, Java, C#, and I didn't mention it there, but C++. I'm also involved in a number of different open source projects, but the ones I thought would be of most interest to the PowerBuilder community I listed on the slide. So this is a little bit about the company I work for, and let's get right into theming your applications. So themes affect the looks of data windows, and most controls. I'd done some blog articles much earlier about trying to theme applications with stuff like a tool called SkinCrafter, for example. And the problem with most tools that are available for skinning Windows applications is that they interact with the window controls APIs. So there's an API you can use to talk to all the command buttons and to all the list boxes. They're all standard Windows controls, and so these tools can get in there and they can interact with the controls and provide their however you're going to theme them. But the problem with that is the PowerBuilder data window is really powerful. But one of the things that makes it really powerful and actually creates a problem in this case is the way it renders at runtime. It doesn't render as a whole bunch of different controls. So if you've got 100 columns and 100 rows and you display it on a window, it doesn't display 10,000 objects. I'm trying to remember, that's what 100 times 100 is. It displays two objects. It displays a bitmap. What PowerBuilder does internally is it renders what those columns and rows looks like into a bitmap, and then it renders a edit control that floats across the surface of the data window. And since it's only those two controls, and since there's really no capability of tools like SkinCrafter to go in there and try to figure out how to theme the bitmap that got generated, these controls didn't work well with data windows. And most PowerBuilder applications are almost entirely composed of data windows for controls. So these tools didn't work. The theme can either be set as an application property, or there's a function you can call called apply theme, which will set the theme more at runtime. So if you set it as an application property, that setting gets compiled into the application, or as I just mentioned, you can use the apply theme method. It cannot be used with Windows Classic Style. Windows Classic Style The way that's achieved is that there's a Windows ActiveX it's a Windows System ActiveX that goes in and alters the display of controls back in the old classic style, and that's going to override anything you did with your theming. It also has no effect on Windows Server 2003, 2008, or 2008 R2, which really shouldn't be an issue unless maybe you're doing Citrix or something and you're using a really old version of Windows Server. I can't imagine that's really going to be much of an issue for many people. Now, in the original release of PowerBuilder 2019, there were some controls, a number of controls that still couldn't be themed. On the window, it was included the menu, the toolbar, and the scroll bar. The old layout control and ActiveX controls, you really couldn't do much with. That's probably going to continue to be the case because it's the same issue as other controls had with the data window, because in an OLA controller or ActiveX control, it's whatever you're using there that's actually doing the rendering. It's not PowerBuilder. Anyway, the drawing controls, the line, the oval, the rectangle, round rectangle, they weren't affected by theming. Picture and picture hyperlink, and once again, obviously there's a picture that makes up the vast majority of this control, and so there's no real ability for PowerBuilder to get in there and change the way the bitmap looks, or whatever format your picture is in. The animation control, once again, same issue here with animation, because it's that's something else is rendering. Once again, PowerBuilder's not going to really be able to theme that. And same is true with the rich text edit control. You control the border, you can format the border, but really everything within the control is being, its look and feel is being determined by the rich text edit, or the rich text code that's inside of that control, and so that's going to be difficult to theme as well. Also, the data window title bar, because essentially what PowerBuilder is doing on the covers is basing this on a Windows control, and that title bar, like the Windows title bar up here, wasn't controllable. Also, and this gets more into still the stuff that's rendered by something else. The Windows system dialogues are being rendered by Windows, not by PowerBuilder. So if you call save as or file open, you're going to get Windows dialogues that they're themed based on the way your desktop is themed, not the way your application is themed. And PowerBuilder system dialogues are also unaffected. So this looks like quite a list, but as we see when we get into the demo, there's actually an awful lot that is themable, and this list actually is by comparison is still fairly short. Lastly, there's a number of different data window styles, grid, tabular, freeform, which are the more commonly used ones. But these ones, the label, the composite, OLA 2.0, and rich text, those are unaffected by theming. And there's one other thing here. When you render a data window to either print it or to save it as PDF, the theming doesn't apply, which is probably a good thing, because what you might want to have display on the screen while your application is running is probably not the way you want it to look when you print it out or save it as a PDF. Now, okay, so if you try to keep that list in mind, a number of these things got addressed in R2. So in R2, you now have this is not the list of what can't be themed. This is the list of the things that now theming can be done for. So in 2019 R2, you can now theme Windows toolbars, Windows menus, toolbars, and scroll bars. You can now theme more of, I should say, the OLA control, ActiveX control, and user object. You're still going to have the issue with the material that's inside of the control not being themable, but some of the properties to control outside of the content in the center can be controlled now. The ribbon bar and web browser are actually new controls that were added in 2019 R2, and their theming capability was provided with them as they were introduced. So here's the application property, a dialog, and up through 2017, it went up to rich text edit control. This theme option is the new tab that's been provided, so we can do theming. The default is do not use themes, so you'll get the standard PowerBuilder flat gray look and feel. But then they've got these are well, 3 of these are Appeon provided themes. There was actually a 4th one. This is actually from early, or I actually should say late in the beta, when they had a blue, gray, and silver theme. They didn't really have a dark theme, and so Flat Design Black is one I created. But subsequently, before the product went GA, Appeon provided a dark theme as well. I believe they call it Flat Design Dark. So anyway, you'd see Flat Design Dark, blue, gray, and silver. But as we'll get into here, you can also do what I did, which was create my own theme. So this is how you can set it in the application property. What this is a list of folders that you find in the program files Appeon shared PowerBuilder theme 190 directory. So if you create your own themes, you can drop them. You can create a folder for them in that same directory. And that's what I did here, and that makes it appear on the dialog, so you can actually see my theme as well. But you can also use the apply theme method. So what you can do is at runtime you can say apply theme, and you can just give it the folder name, like you did in the application property. You can say Flat Design Blue. And PowerBuilder will look, actually in runtime, it looks at for a PB190 theme folder in its own application directory, and looks for a folder name that theme 190, and then looks for the folder name underneath that folder. So in development, like I said with the application properties, and this is true with the application properties as well. If you say Flat Design Blue, either in the application properties or in the apply theme, in development, it will look in the shared PowerBuilder theme 190 folder for that folder name. But at runtime, it will look for a theme 190 folder underneath your application folder, and look for the folder name there. So if you want to simply, and we'll get into this when we talk about deploying your themes, but if you simply want to deploy your themes underneath your application, this works just fine. You just give it the folder name, and your theme will work. You might want to put the theme file someplace else, though, and the reason I would suggest this is if you want your end users to have the ability to customize the theme for their own preferences. And if that's some capability you want to provide to them, you need to give them a location that you put the theme in that they can actually they have control over. And in most cases, the end users aren't going to be able to write into a folder that's underneath the program files area, which is where your application is going to be. So what you can do is you could, in this case, this would put the theme files into the user's app data local directory, which they can write to, and they could then go in there and customize that theme. And then what you can do then is you can take that whole path and you can pass it into apply theme, and PowerBuilder will look for it in that location rather than in the application folder. Now, Appeon does recommend you call apply theme in the application open event before any windows are opened. I think perhaps the primary reason they recommend that is that if you pop open some windows first and then do an apply theme, the user is going to see the windows come up, in the standard PowerBuilder flat gray, and all of a sudden pop into some other color, which might might be disconcerting to the users to do that, have that happen. That's the main reason I've seen for that. In my demo, I'm actually going to use a drop-down list box to flip between different themes, and it actually seems to work. There is a corresponding get theme method, and there's a Boolean argument for that. So if you don't provide the Boolean, it defaults to false, and it will just give you the folder name. If you say true for that argument, it will give you the full path name to the theme folder. And if you're not using themes, then you'll get an empty stream back. Now, what you can't do is you can't say apply theme and pass an empty string and watch the theming get turned off. You have to provide a theme even to remove themes. So the way you can remove themes is you can actually create a custom theme, and you can call it something like do not use themes, or something that makes sense to you, where the theming is actually turned off within the theme, and we'll talk about that. There's a setting in the theme file. I actually talk about it here. It says drawing, and it's either true or false. Now, by default, in theme files, it's set to true for every control. Every control has a different section in the theme file. One of the first entries is drawing, and then it's set to true, and that means that the theming applies to the control. If you set to false, that means don't apply the theme settings to the control. And so if you go in for every control and put in drawing false, you're basically saying don't use themes, and then you can use that theme as the theme, and that will turn theming off. So maybe not something you're necessarily worrying about, but if that's something you do need to worry about, that's how you do it. So let's talk about creating your own theme. Well, the first thing I would recommend, if you're going to create your own theme, and it's what I did, is to copy an existing theme folder. And the reason you want to do that is because there are a large number of image files involved. There's 81 bitmaps, 4 icons, and 53 PNG files. Actually, just occurred to me, this was with 2019, the original release. Given that some extra controls were added and some additional capabilities were added in 2019 R2, these numbers may have gone up. But anyway, it's 100 plus files that you're going to need to provide with your own theme, and it's probably simplest just to take the existing files from another theme and customize them for the look and feel you want, which is what I did. The reason there are so many files is that for every control, there is a bitmap that's used to render that control in its different states. So a command button could be in a normal mode, it could be in a pressed mode, it could be in a disabled mode, it could be, there it is, hover. There's a hover mode for some controls. And so there's actually a different bitmap or a different image file, let's say, not just a bitmap, it could be a PNG file. There's a different image file for each of the different states that the control can be in. So that's that. So you take the number of controls that you can display in PowerBuilder, you multiply by the number of different states each control can have, and you get some fairly high numbers there for the number of images. There's actually 2 other files. There's a preview.bitmap and a preview.jp.bitmap file that are provided with the built-in themes, and they are used when you change this option here for the theme in the application dialog, it shows you what the theme will look like. This only works for built-in themes, though. I've tried providing my own file, a preview.bitmap file with my theme, and all that ever displays when you change to a custom theme in this drop-down is just gray. It doesn't actually render using that bitmap. So just something to be aware of. So here's the other thing that's in that directory other than all the bitmaps. And this is kind of what drives the whole thing. It's a theme.json file. And it's essentially like a cascading style sheet. So here's that drawing equals true, or not equals, but the drawing colon true up at the very top. This is for a checkbox. So if I said drawing colon false, then it would ignore all the rest of the settings in this document for the checkbox. And then, in fact, I could just leave out the rest of the settings if this was set to false. It's set to true, though, and here's what I was referring earlier to the different states. So there's a normal state, there's a hover state, and you can see just the top of the press state there. So there's different states, and then there's states within states. There's the unchecked state, the checked state, and the indeterminate state. This is for a checkbox. So you've got those three states for normal, those three states for hover, those three states for pressed, and each one of them has a different bitmap file associated with it. Okay, so that's going to determine a large part of how the control is going to render. There's also other settings, though. For example, the text font is controlled by the JSON file. So you can see here that this is set to black, I believe. And then you'll see some other examples here later in the file. For instance, so here's your background color, border colors. They're specified there as well. All these values are hex color values. There's a border setting here, and there's actually 3 values for this border setting. 0 means I'm going to create the border based on what was done in the PowerBuilder painter. So whatever the PowerBuilder, if the PowerBuilder painter specified there should be a border here, then there'll be a border here. And if it said there's not a border, there's not going to be a border. But this can be overridden. You can say 1. It means regardless of what was done in the PowerBuilder IDE, always draw the border. And then the other option is 2. Regardless of what was done in the PowerBuilder IDE, never draw the border. And then there's the drawing true I referenced earlier. Okay, one thing that's important to know. This is because it's to talk about the large number of bitmaps. There's all these different bitmaps. There's all these different color settings, all these different border settings, all the different things you can specify. That's in this. They're all in this one JSON file. This is a fairly large JSON file, and if it's easy to make a mistake in a JSON file to leave out a semicolon or a bracket. Missing a quote, it's easy to get the syntax wrong. The problem is that if you have any mistakes in the syntax, PowerBuilder will ignore your theme file when you go to apply it, and you'll just get the standard look and feel rather than the theme you wanted. So it's important when you're creating your own theme file to validate the JSON to make sure that it's actually formatted correctly. That the syntax, I should say, the syntax is correct, not the format. And so there are third-party utilities that will validate JSON for you. This happens to be one that's just an online website where you just paste it's called JSON lint, and you just paste your theme.json into the website, hit validate JSON, and it will tell you whether there's an error with your JSON or not, and it will tell you what the error is. That's what's happening down here. It's telling me I'm missing Probably missing a comma there. So that's how you can create your own themes. Now let's get into the new R2 feature. That's the ability to theme at a lower level than just the entire application. Okay, so what you have to do in order to do window or control level theming is to provide a file that starts with the word theme hyphen and end in JSON. So for example, theme hyphen custom.json. And you can have several of these files for the same application. Like if you want to get you could have one per window that you're providing a custom theme for, or however you want to organize it. You can have only one theme.json file that covers the entire application, but you can have as many of these custom theme files as you want. And there's an order that PowerBuilder looks at to determine how it's actually going to render the control. The first thing it's going to look at, the first thing it's going to do is if you've got, let's say, the drawing : false, it's just going to render it the controls in the native PowerBuilder format. But if you have the do not theme turned on, it's not going to theme anything. But if you've got theming turned on and if you've got the drawing set to true, then the first thing it's going to look at is the application level theme file. Then it's going to look for a custom theme file that references control types, not specific controls. You can have a custom theme for a window that applies to all controls of a certain type in the window. And we'll see this in the demo where I decide to change all the radio buttons in the window to a particular format. Or you can do a custom theme for a specific control, and this will be in the demo as well, where I take a specific radio button and I change it specifically to have a different format. Now, if for some reason you have multiple custom theme files and for some reason you reference the same control type in the same window or the same control in the same window in multiple files, the way PowerBuilder is going to resolve that is it's going to order the custom theme files alphabetically and then take the last one and use the setting from the last one for that particular control. So here's an example of what a custom theme file would look like. It's going to start off the same way as the normal theme.json file. Starts off with this header. But here I've got, this is a reference to a particular window, and the $sign means a control type. So this is how I specify the format for checkboxes, all checkboxes, in this particular window. And then this is specifying the format for the command button for this particular window. And the only thing I really need to have in this file is what I want to have different from the application theming. So in this case, I changed the color to red, the text color to red. And only for the normal state. Once again, this is a radio button where I'm changing the formatting at a control type level, because that's a $sign. This is W pop-up 2, and this is actually changing the format for a window. So I'm changing the background color for the window, not for so you can affect the window and the controls in the window. Now here's an example of the other even more specific way of doing the theming. Notice I had command button, let's say. So this affected the command button, actually a checkbox. This is a checkbox. This is controlling the format of checkboxes in the window. All checkboxes. This next one says so you got a $sign there. This is a type. This is a period. this is a control name. So now I'm looking at a specific checkbox in this window, and I'm saying I want this checkbox, not affecting any other checkboxes. This specific checkbox is going to have this particular format where I've actually made the color green. Okay, this is not going to be a particularly attractive window. I chose these colors just to make things stand out. And yeah, this is what it ends up looking like. So in window pop-up 1, I said the text on the radio button, the checkboxes, and the command button were all going to be red. In this window, I didn't specify anything for control level, so it took the default, which this is a dark theme, so the text is actually white. So this is default white, default white, default white from the application level JSON file. And then this is where I made the reference to the specific control. This is checkbox 2, where I've changed its text to green instead. And you'll see in the demo, because I only affected the normal state, when I hover over these controls that have different colors, they actually revert back to white, because that's the color for in the application level JSON file for the hover state. The other thing I'll point out here is I actually inherited pop-up 2 from pop-up 1, and even though I've specified settings for pop-up 1, they don't apply to pop-up 2 because PowerBuilder is looking at the window name, and it knows that this is a different window than this window, even though they're inherited from one another. Okay, so we've created our custom themes. Maybe we even created some custom control themes. How do we deploy all this? And we touched on this actually a little bit earlier. So by default, what PowerBuilder is going to do at runtime, it's going to look for a theme 190 folder underneath your application folder, and then it's going to look for a folder name that matches the theme, the name of the theme you're applying. So that by default, that's where you're going to want to put it. If you're going to put it in the application property, that's where you're going to have to put it. If you're going to say apply a theme and just give it a folder name, that's where you're going to have to put it. But the other option is to put it in some other location, like I said earlier on, maybe in the local app data section for the user, and then use the apply theme method and give it the full path to the folder name. As I mentioned earlier, that's because the application folder is usually system controlled and wouldn't allow the user to edit it. And if you move the themes into a user directory, they could go ahead and edit the theme as well themselves and really get whatever kind of look and feel they want. So we're going to do a little demo, and then we're going to have the questions and answers. Okay, so we're going to look at what the theming actually looks like here. So this isn't theme. This is the standard way that PowerBuilder looks, and you can see all your familiar controls. I've taken every control you can put on a PowerBuilder window, and I've got it on one of these tabs here. So you can see there's actually quite a bit here. And then you get down to the very end, and this is the tab that shows the stuff that actually isn't themable. And as you can see, it probably sounded like a lot more when I covered it in the session. But there's an awful lot you can theme, and just a very few things you can't. So let's see what this looks like when this is the 4 different themes. Notice I'm in the PowerBuilder shared folder. These are the 4 themes that Appeon provides, and notice, yeah, that is quite a bit different than the default PowerBuilder look. And then there's another example of what it looks like, what one of the themes looks like. So you get some feel for just how much you can change the way that your PowerBuilder application looks through the different theme files. That's the application level stuff. I'm going to go over here, and you saw this picture in the session as well. So I specified that the controls in W pop-up 1 by their control types should have a red text. And notice when I hover over them, hover is a different state. And so it's defaulting back to white, which is the application level theme setting here. And then once again, when I hover back off, the window specific setting that I provided in my custom theme file is taking effect. So in wpop-up 1, the color changes were specified as a result of the control type. Okay, and then in wpop-up 2, I changed the background color through a window specific setting. And notice how that last checkbox is green. That wasn't done by a control style setting. That was actually done by a specific control setting. Because I didn't specify any override for the other controls in the window, either by a control style or by a specific control, they take the default white. So those are using the application level setting. These are using control type settings, and this is using a control specific setting. So that's how that works. Anyway, that's theming.